Good evening. I'm Ken Garrison, former pastor of the Fellowship Church in Florida and the director of the Zamach Institute for Biblical Studies. Today we want to start a new series that I'll call Hebraic Roots. Several years ago I wrote a book called Hebraic Roots, and it was based on our Lord's direction to identify with Israel and our experience of actually carrying that out. For 35 years, we worked to establish a church that we believe would be patterned after the first century church. So that is the basis of our theme, Hebraic Roots. We want to maintain that in our day especially, churches need very badly and ultimately will be forced, I think, to either identify with a global Antichrist type church or with Israel. I think we'll be pushed into that corner eventually. So that's the reason that we're sharing Hebraic Roots. Now, this thing is prompted to deal with this at this time because of several factors that are just the reality of our age. First of all, a startling fact to consider is that our generation of Christian believers, we represent the first generation from the first century, that first century Jerusalem church led by people like Peter and John and Paul. We represent the first generation since that generation that actually existed at a time when the Israeli people were in the land of Israel, and Israel was a sovereign state. So now Paul wrote a letter to the Ephesians chapter 2, that as believers we have been made a part of the commonwealth of Israel. Now, when he said the commonwealth of Israel, that literally means the political life of Israel. So that's how grafted in we as followers of Messiah Jesus ought to be relative to Israel. And I'll say to you quickly that most churches are far from that, and we'll develop that as we go along today. Now, another factor that is an issue today is that we appear to be approaching a global conflict that the Bible refers to as Armageddon. Global unity, a union of all the nations of the world allied against Israel. That's what Armageddon will be. That's what it represents. I think the Muslim-Israeli conflict today it's known as the so-called Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it's a Muslim-Israeli conflict. I think because of that, a growing concern among the nations, and I'll tell you that most of the nations identify with the Palestinians, not with Israel. As a matter of fact, already the predominant entity that sees itself, or sympathetic at least, to Israel, is the evangelical Christian community. No one else in the world does so. So ultimately, the Bible says all the nations will come against Israel, Zechariah chapter 12, and we believe that we're approaching that even in our days. Now, another issue that brings us to this conclusion that we're approaching this end time, Jesus said that the time of his coming, or his return, would be as the days of Noah. Now we know in Genesis 6, in the days of Noah, that it's written that the sons of God entered into the daughters of men, and they had offspring called Nephilim. The Hebrew word Nephal means to fall, literally fall. And so Nephilim means the fallen ones. Evidently, their human genome was altered or polluted by this intervention, whatever it was. And the Bible doesn't go into any detail describe in more detail what that literally means. Although the sons of God throughout the Bible are treated as like angelic or demonic beings. Now, today with science, we're doing the same thing. The human genome a few years ago was mapped out. The DNA molecule was mapped out, and it has the techniques has been developed in biological science to be able to splice that DNA chain and put in new molecules, new sections of that DNA chain. It's called CRISPR. That's the technique. A lady received the Nobel Prize in Science for that. Now, that is altering the human genome. We read of nations that are actually using that technique to develop what they see as super soldiers. We also can imagine very rich people paying for to obtain what we'll call designer children. In any case, we're talking about an altered genome. So this is something really to be concerned about. In addition, God intervened at Babel to confuse the languages, and he did so in order to limit actual human cooperation, to limit the dimension of evil that could be manifested through mankind. And in doing so, the nation states were created, and mankind scattered over the whole earth. And it comes to where we are today. Well, we're overcoming that barrier also. Actually, the language of the internet is English, and that is really overcoming what God did at Babel. And we also know that there are experimentation in implanting chips into people's brains and hardwiring them, and so it's not difficult to imagine a day coming when a person could be connected directly to the internet and absolutely overcome everything that was done at Babel. So God promised that the next intervention after, now we had the flood, we had the reduced lifespan, we had Babel, and God says that the next intervention is he's going to send a king to rule the mankind with a rod of iron. In the book of Revelation it talks about. Okay, who is that king? Well, we maintain that king will be Jesus. So he's coming to rule in the earth. Now, one final point that I'd like to make that kind of points to this end time situation that we believe that we're approaching. I'll make a statement, and you have to think about it. Of all the people that have ever lived, approximately a third are alive today. That is to say, if we started counting and integrating from Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel, Seth, on through all the way up to you and me, and counted all of those, the number would be something like 20 billion. Now, the present world population is over 8 billion. So roughly a third of all the people that have ever lived are alive today. Now, the population density is driving some of the judgments that we see in the book of Revelation. Many of those are environmental in nature, and this is being driven to some degree by this population. So all of these factors point to the fact that mankind is rapidly approaching a climactic time that's going to lead to we believe Armageddon, according to the prophecies, and thereby an intervention of God to establish his king. Now, there are two groups of people in the world that base their life on basically biblical principles. They are, number one, the Orthodox Jews, especially settlers in Israel, whose lifestyle is patterned after the Bible. Means their confession, their practice, their family structure, all of these things they adhere to biblical patterns. And now that's been true throughout the ages for the Jewish community. Now the other group that I'm speaking of, I guess I'll call them evangelical Christians. Now when I say evangelical Christians, I mean people that have a vivid faith in Jesus. They believe in the virgin birth, atoning death, a bodily resurrection, ascension, and the hope of his returning. All of those things I would say would constitute a real believer, evangelical believer. Now, even though, and I know many people throughout all the years as a pastor, I've met hundreds, thousands perhaps, very, very real believers, yet they maintain a separate identity from Israel. They maintain what I call a Catholic identity. Now, when I say Catholic, I mean universal. I'm not speaking of the Roman Catholic Church. In that sense, and in the sense that I'm speaking of, the Baptists or the Pentecostals are as Catholic as the Pope in that regard. They maintain identity separate from Israel. Now, there's another issue in evangelical Christianity, the Gnostic influence that was introduced in this 2nd and 3rd century that causes the church to basically only look at going to heaven, looking for a means of living this life. It's a tough life. Eventually we'll die, go to a better place, and that vision in Christianity is maintained pretty much throughout the evangelical church. Is in common with the ancient Gnostics and what they believe. I think the church is going to have to overcome that. So, as all of these events take place, there is a polarization that's occurring in the earth. Remember that Jesus said, "I didn't come to establish peace; I come to divide," and that's polarization, and it's happening. With the ultimate picture of that division. Ending up at Armageddon and God's intervention at that time. Now, I've been going to Israel, been there many times, interacting with folks there over the past 40-some years, and I have seen the trend in Israel of them moving more and more toward a biblical pattern of life. That seems to be they're believing to be God's unique people in God's unique land. One of the statements that you hear in Israel is Mashiach Akshav. That means Messiah now. They're waiting, looking for the advent of the Messiah in their terms. This is particularly apparent in the so-called settlement movement throughout all the heartlands of Israel. Now, because of the pressure on evangelical believers, I believe the pressure is going to be on evangelicals to identify with Israel as this polarization gets more and more intense. Again, the Jewish people have not left their identity. Christians have. Remember, Paul wrote that we as people from Gentile backgrounds that are following Jesus have been grafted into Israel in Romans 11, in Ephesians 2, made a part of the commonwealth of Israel. Christianity, or real believers, should be seen as a subset of Israel, just like they were in the 1st century. Now remember, the Antichrist is Catholic. I don't mean that he's Roman Catholic. The Antichrist is global. We talk about a one world government, a global government, Antichrist government. All of these things are universal or Catholic. And so Christians must consider becoming a part of Israel in our day and rejecting global or Catholic identity. We must identify with Israel. For this reason, I'm going to prepare a series of messages dealing with Hebraic roots that will show you the rationale and help you find the way to indeed adapt Hebraic roots as a believer. All right, that's our session for today. I hope that you'll tune in next week and follow up with the next session. Shalom.